Hey, this is Dr. Jason Munsell. These are my new computer glasses. I don't need glasses, but I have read about these and they actually sort of work. They're like tiny little magnification, like a 1 point or whatever. I don't understand any of that stuff. But it's supposed to stop some of the glare and stuff that you oftentimes get on the computer. And so I know sometimes I spend most of my waking hours, it seems, on the computer, and that, you know, how things get sort of blurry and fuzzy. This stuff actually sort of works. Plus, it gives me the facade of looking intelligent. And plus, it's Italy design and made in China. Fancy. This is the video or the recorded lecture to accompany the chapter 5 for day 7, June 12th. I haven't been on email for a while because I've been working on lots of other things. So if you have emailed me since noonish, though it's about 3 o'clock now, on June 12th, 2013, then I apologize that I haven't responded to your email. But I did look through some stuff this morning, tweets and blogs and stuff like that. And frankly, some of you need to get with the program a bit. I know I said I'd be very, very flexible, but I don't want you all to get so behind on some stuff that you find it difficult to make it up. Because really, the stuff isn't all that hard. I know the reading's tough, but you know, you're not being tested on anything. So really, you know, you could get by if you just sort of skim some of the reading with looking at my PowerPoints and maybe skimming some of these videos, because I'm giving you very, very clear critical probes or questions that you can ask yourself to blog and to tweet when you are visiting these sites online, and I'm giving you the various addresses for websites for those particular tours, but you can find others if you find better stuff. That's all cool with me. And I'm really being very lenient when it comes to the videos, or excuse me, when it comes to your emails to me. When it comes to the tweets, and when it comes to the blogs, and even when it comes to the threaded discussions, lenient when it comes to terms of grading, so long as you do it. And you know, it really, at least from my vantage point, shouldn't take you a whole lot of time to do all that type of stuff. I haven't put the second thread discussion up yet. I will later on. What was I going to say? Oh, the most important thing to me, though, is the paper. The paper at the end. That's what I'll be really focused on when it comes to my grading, because I want you to have something that you're very proud of, and that maybe you will want to submit to a journal, or an undergraduate journal, or we'll probably start with a conference or something like that. So in any case, please keep up with your work, and let me know how I can help. It's easy to email me and to text me and all that type of stuff if you are confused about various things. Okay, so I'm going to try to be brief. I always say that, but this time I mean it. The second slide here is a picture of Clint Eastwood, Escape from Alcatraz. This chapter is not about that, even though I watched it last night in preparation for this lesson. And also I learned the actual escape was June 11th, 1962, and I watched Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood June 11th, 2013. Wow. This is about, though, in the next slide, third slide, the Native American occupation of Alcatraz, and how the entire tour of Alcatraz, as is laid out, sort of diminishes the information, or diminishes the whole civil disobedience that Native Americans did, or when they occupied Alcatraz. And so the next slide really gets into Chapter 5 and their introduction. And again, in a nutshell, this whole thing is about the official memory that's laid out in the tour from the perspective of this is all about the prison and everything like that, as opposed to the memory of the Native American occupation. And the main contention is on page 161 in the middle of the paragraph. And this is what they say, and this is really pretty clear. By the way, I thought this is the best chapter that we've read so far. It is amazingly clear and well written, and it's very, very descriptive about the tour, so you almost, as you're reading it, feel like you're going along on the tour, and that's been quite a bit different, I think, from some of the other chapters. Though I do think the chapter on the fist was pretty descriptive, and we saw visuals and stuff like that of the fist, so we could actually see it. But here's what they say. Ultimately, we argue that the visitors' lack of any physical access to the island spaces inhabited during the occupation. Occupation seriously and negatively affects both attention to and the staying power of occupation memories. While visitors can directly engage with the prison by moving through it, walking into cells, and even touching objects, there is no parallel experience of the occupation available, which again sort of diminishes the whole possibility, in a sense, of the Native American occupation being a large aspect of the official public memory here. Basically the idea here then is that the tour reinscribes respect for a government's coercive authority. I think that's very important. It's as if all the tourists are prisoners. And in fact, metaphorically, as tourists, we are always prisoners to the so-called official memory. But it's also like a part of that also is like it's fun. I've never gone. I've been to San Francisco, but I've never gone to Alcatraz. Well, let me say I have not been since I was incarcerated there back in the 50s. Actually, it was the 60s. I knew Frank Morris. I think that's his name. He was actually a pretty cool guy. He played the harmonica. So it's also sort of a fun family outing, sort of like Alcatraz, or Alcatraz is sort of like, you know, Six Flags or Disneyland or something like that, or Carowinds. Ooh, it's fun for the entire family. But basically they say that the whole tour, it's a missed opportunity to teach folks about the Native American occupation and civil disobedience, and that stuff is on the top of page 162. And I will let you read that, but I think that's what they're getting at, that this whole tour is a missed opportunity. And then what the authors do on the middle of page 162 is offer a very, very clear preview of what they're going to do throughout the entire chapter. And again, it's very, very clear, and so I will let you read this. And as I say here, again, I really like this chapter. I love this chapter. I thought it was, again, the best one that we have read so far. They set up the contextual stuff. This is the next slide, slide 5, about the evolving history of the entire Alcatraz. I think to me the most interesting part was about the Sioux Treaty of 1868. And they also use the word stick a lot, like what sticks as the main public or official memory. And I think that's important because even as there are multiple memories there are certain memories or certain things that we get from stuff that tends to stick. That this is what this is really all about, not so much about that stuff. And so what they're saying is the prison stuff that sticks here, not so much the Native American occupation. The next slide, slide 6, is more of sort of their theoretical stuff, and they talk about this idea of constructing identities through memory sites. And I'll let you read that theoretical discussion, but it's really pretty easy to understand. And they also talk about some of the stuff that Clark said in the previous chapter that you read, but also his book, and it's much clearer than how Clark put it. But basically, they're talking about this whole thing as a public experience and they make some arguments that tourists here are positioned as well-behaved, law-abiding Americans. That's sort of the lesson here from the experience, this identity or the shared sense of community that the tour wants to offer, the the authors argue. The tour makes sure tourists do not identify, they argue, with civil disobedience as a response to governmental abuse of power. And so they don't want you to model, as tourists, they don't want tourists to model themselves after the Native Americans who occupied Alcatraz. They want you to be more like the prisoners. And they also offer more from the scholar Nora that was in some previous reading about how sites of memory are pretty interesting because there's some tangible evidence that you can see and touch stuff that was there back in the day. And then while there is a lot of stuff about the Native American occupation, by the way, throughout the entire the PowerPoint I use just NAO, which stands for Native American Occupation. Even though there's stuff there, they just simply say it's insufficient. And that section ends with a little bit of stuff about Burke, talking about issues of setting. Some of you have been in my classes where I talked about Burke's pentad, and basically they say that the setting or the scene is sort of making sure that tourists remember this, not as necessarily a site of civil disobedience, but again, a prison. Okay, the next slide it starts this really interesting tour. We as readers are given this tour much like the tourist would, and so they have this idea departing for the rock, and they talk about the ferry rides and how there's this really interesting juxtaposition between the freedom of the mainland and the isolation of the rock. Not the Rock as in that wrestler, but the Rock as in Alcatraz, nor the Rock as that movie with Sean Connery and that other guy. There's some interesting discussion about the audio stuff that apparently I guess is playing while you're on the ferry, but also some of the initial information. But basically, the idea here is that they give short shrift to the Native American occupation. That it's really all about the prison, even as tourists can see Native American occupation graffiti. It's framed in such a way through other signage and other things that are said that this is, again, you're visiting a prison. The 8th slide here talks about the dock talk. I guess it's the talk that rangers give. By the way, this is very much like Fort Sumter. If you've ever gone to Fort Sumter, and you will be going at least through the internet virtually tomorrow, there are these speeches given by rangers about the Civil War and brother against brother. So basically they talk about how they offer a bunch of rules about what you can and cannot do at Alcatraz, and then sort of introduce the tour. And then after this introduction, folks can either go to the cell house, which is where all the cells are, which I guess is the most popular stuff, or you can actually go to barracks, where I guess there's some places to see some more introductory films and exhibits. But basically they said that about half of the folks don't even go to those other exhibits. They want to go straight to the cell house and then see all the cells and stuff like that, which again emphasizes the idea that this is about a prison, not about the Native American occupation. The next slide, slide 9, Stories from the Rock, that is for the folks who actually take in these other things and don't go straight to the cell house. And apparently there's some films, or some introductory film, and one of them, well, the main one does, the authors say, offer about 3 minutes worth of commentary regarding the Native American occupation, but again, 3 minutes out of the entire thing, which I think they said was about an hour or something like that. I can't remember. And then the main point of this section is that it's interesting to look at the film as a documentary film and how